Hello, and welcome to another online video forming the content for my Music Humanities class. I'm Brad. In this video, we're going to be talking about the Renaissance again. In fact, we're going to be getting to what they call the High Renaissance. And let me bring up the timeline here and show you what I mean. We talked about medieval. There's the early medieval and late medieval. But the Renaissance, we really kind of divide into three areas musically. The early, the High Renaissance, and the late Renaissance. They're kind of differentiated. The High Renaissance composers really did that imitative polyphony thing in a big way, especially due to one composer we'll talk about in a second, Josquin. We're going to start talking about Johannes Ockeghem. By the way, the late Renaissance kind of had to pay the price for that imitative polyphony stuff, and we'll talk about that when we get to it. Anyhow, so we're going to speak about Johannes Ockeghem. Okay, let me give you some of his stats. Johannes Ockeghem. He was born in 1410 and lived to a nice old age, 1497. Okay, and he was born outside of Brussels in the kind of the northern area, the Flanders area. And he did not go south. He spent most of his life in kind of this northern area of France and Brussels and things like that. He was a very well-known singer when he was younger, but then started bending his talents towards composition, became a very well-known composer and teacher. Part of the reason I think he stayed there is because he also became very connected politically. In fact, he was sent on a secret mission to the King of Spain to help with the alliance between France and Spain against United Kingdom of Britain back then. So yeah, he didn't go down to the nice weather in Italy, but he did pretty well for himself. He had a pretty strong relationship with the church. Again, as a singer, he was employed by the church when he was younger, and he was commissioned to do a number of masses. And let me just play you an example of one of his masses here. Okay, this is Ockeghem. So you can hear some of that imitated polyphony, not quite as dense as we're going to get, but it has that nice rounded character. He's using the harmony of the third. But what's particularly interesting is that there is no break for the chant. At this point, the composers are saying, it's ridiculous that we interrupt our glorious music with these stupid chants. And the church, by and large, went along with it because they were seeing people coming in and listening to this music, and it was beginning to become established as the sacred music of the time. But something else is interesting. The name of this, Missa Sine Nomine, that was the Kyrie, of course. You heard the Kyrie eleison. Missa Sine Nomine, a mass without a name. So this is just a generic mass. This is kind of intriguing because in the past they were always tied to the liturgy, and here this is becoming a bit more abstract. Here's the Gloria from that mass, and again you'll hear the same kind of things I'm talking about. Also listen for the cadences where it kind of stops a little bit. I'll talk about that in a second. He did hedge his bets a little bit. He snuck a little bit of the chant in right at the beginning there, but then it just took off and went on its merry musical way. It's interesting because even though he is cadencing at particular points, it never comes to a full stop because he's being a clever composer and keeping the music going. It's a way, like I said, to keep the story, the interest up, and people are kind of following this. I'm going to play one more of his. This is his Missa Quinte Tone, or his Mass in the fifth tone. Again, getting more abstract here. Now it's not even related at all to liturgy. It's a musical name. The fifth tone was the fifth degree of the scale, the fifth mode. They're still using the modal system here. At this point, though, the modes have lost most of their currency in terms of their deeper kind of social and cultural meaning. But here's an example of Ockeghem doing this. There's a real nice cadence there, just led you through this glorious Kyrie, and then they wound up in this marvelous harmony again, and the third was present. So the satanic aspect of the third has now become completely subsumed. Anyhow, so Ockeghem, like I said, he became pretty well known, both as a composer and as a teacher, and he had a student, Josquin Desprez. He's pretty much just known by his first name, Josquin, like Cher or Madonna or whoever. He lived from 1450 to 1521, again, right in the middle of this sort of Renaissance timeline. I'll show you the Josquin thing right about there. So he is the high Renaissance guy. And in fact, many people consider him one of the greatest composers ever in the Western tradition. He was just a monster. He wrote over 600 works. We don't even know many of them because they were lost because it was back in 1500. And he did all kinds of musical stuff. Well, where did he come from? He was one of those that kind of escaped. He was born again outside kind of Belgium in the area of Brussels, and he was a student of Johannes Ockeghem's. Ockeghem taught him all his sort of techniques for doing imitative polyphony, his techniques for cadencing and things like that. But Josquin says the weather here is terrible, like before, and he did in fact emigrate down to Italy, and he went to work in Milan for the Sforza family, again, one of those big, wealthy Italian families. He was an independent composer, was not employed directly by the church, although the church commissioned a number of pieces from him. He ultimately also wound up working in Rome for Duke Ferrara. He was also a gifted singer, like Ockeghem, but again, he became primarily known for his compositional work. And yeah, I can't underestimate how famous he was as a composer. I mean, he put to shame everybody else coming along, including Leonin and Peritan. Martin Luther. I mean, again, Josquin, he's a Catholic guy here. Martin Luther, who was also quite a musician, said that he said, "Other musicians do with notes what they can. Josquin does what he likes." So, he really, really changed the way that music was being done. Let me give you an example of that, okay? This is a mass. It's called Leoma Armes, and it's in the sixth tone. I'm going to talk about the title in a second, but here is some Josquin for you. that's pretty incredible. I mean, you heard the imitated polyphony. And what he's also doing is introducing this notion of different voices. Okay, so this is what we would call four-voice polyphony. What that means, it's like the organum triplum, organum quadruplum. These are the independent voices. So he essentially had four different versions of that melody happening simultaneously. And again, they're all imitating each other, and they're all set up so that they all work together to create these glorious harmonies. And he ends them all together on that glorious cadence. You know, this is a monster composer, and he's setting a mold that that other composers are going to follow for the next N centuries or so. Now, it's interesting about the name of this, L'Homme Armé, that's called The Armed Man. That's it's based on a secular song that was popular in the late medieval period, and it's one of the most used melodies in the Mass at this point. A number of composers wrote masses based on this melody. It's kind of weird. It's not a chant melody any longer. It's a melody taken from the streets because they thought it was a cool melody. And again, very, very popular. It's still performed quite often today. Yeah. And here's another piece of his, again, very popular, Ave Maria, Hail Mary. And this is the Josquin version. There's another version that was done by Franz Schubert much later, but this was kind of the original. Yeah. And here he's doing something interesting. He's taking his cadences where you stop, and he's kind of like then pushing them forward to the next phrase. So again, this music just keeps kind of nicely unfolding and creating just a kind of a wonderful effect. All right. Like I said, he composed many, many things. Wrote for many people. Wrote a lot for the wealthy nobility in Italy. Like I said, the famous families, the Sforzas he was working for, and he would often do pieces, purely instrumental pieces. And again, we have these now written down, so we know what they were. And this would be something done possibly for a state dinner, possibly for, a wedding, who knows. But here's an example of what that sounded like. And there, it's being played on, we have some links to pictures of instruments up on the website, but these are called viols, Viols. Let me write that down for you. Okay. And these are the precursors for the violins and the cellos and things that we currently use. And we'll be talking about that technological change later. But here's what it sounds like. So there's a quarter in there too, and you saw me write this down, halfway through the piece. This is part of, the game that the Italian nobility are playing. They're showing how cool they are because they can employ musicians. You had to have people who were fairly well trained on these instruments to play this music. That means they had to be paid for learning how to play, for practicing, for doing the kinds of things that musicians do. And the wealthy families did that because they're showing we're wealthy. And Josquin and others, of course, thought that was just dandy. anyhow, and he did other kind of entertainment things. This is a piece that he wrote. It's called a madrigal, and we're going to talk about madrigals next time, or maybe in the video after this. But this would be done definitely for entertainment after a feast, some kind of big, maybe a Christmas celebration or something like that. This is called Scaramella. Yeah, nice cadence there. Okay, so this is great fun. I mean, this is the words are about a guy named Scaramella who's going off to battle with his lance and his buckler. Yeah, the double entendre is completely meant, and this is of course just great fun for the Italian nobility. Ho ho ho! And it's an enjoyable piece of music. Again, we're going to talk about madrigals later, and we'll talk a bit more about that. But I want to end this sort of discussion of Josquin by playing a piece that I find remarkable. The same way that piece that I found by Marchand that basically just expressed some inner sort of angst and, depression or whatever. This is a piece that Josquin wrote upon learning of the death of Johannes Ockeghem. I guess they were very close, and the teacher-pupil relationship was very strong. But this is called the Declaration of the Death of Johannes Ockeghem. Yeah, it even sounds sad to us now. Anyhow, so we'll end with that, and until next time.